welcome in. It is the Wrestling Mat. I am happy to be with you, as always, here at 1 p.m. Eastern, each and every day, except for Labor Day. We did put the announcement out there, but hopefully you all enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. There was a lot of wrestling over the weekend. Some of you may have enjoyed some of that wrestling with us right here at thewrestlingmatshow.com. If you remember, you did. We watched Bash at the Beach on Saturday. Had some of you here, which was awesome. Enjoyed talking about the show as it went on. So we might get into a little of that today. I am going to get into a little of that today. No Mercy. I actually just opened my iPad for the first time since like Saturday. I did not watch No Mercy on my iPad, and I just saw I had a Peacock notification, and it said, "He appears." And it was about Joe Hendry challenging. It was a little, push notification about Joe Hendry challenging for the NXT Championship. My goodness, how telling is that? I opened up the Peacock app as a push notification. A very specific "he appears" done for Joe Hendry. That's very impressive. Just wanted to share that because I thought it was interesting to see. Now, as we get into the show here today, thanks to everybody who has been subscribing. Thanks if you're sharing it. Please keep sharing it. And I know we kind of did a little bit of a soft launch at the end of last week, but we are now part of the Believe network of podcasts. This very show, which you watch right here on the Wrestling Mat and you subscribe to, you can now do the same. You'll hear the exact same show. You just won't see me, but you'll hear me. And if you want to do that, I'm asking you if you could do that for us. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I know it's up on Apple and Spotify. You'll see this very logo, the one that you see right here, this logo. It'll have the little Believe Network logo on there as well, but it's this show just in audio form, and you will get that each and every day at the completion of this show. Here's the thing. You always get this first, and we take care of our members that way. So that is always the case. But yeah, please subscribe, rate it, review it. All that stuff really helps. And the fact that we are able to do that is because of the support of you guys and everybody that has been tuning into the show and watching the show. So I really, really greatly appreciate that. And as we start this new week, I'm going to be taking some different approaches to the show in the coming days. I don't think, unless a show is blow away unbelievable, or just god-awful, I don't think anybody is coming in for a full-on 3-hour Raw review. I don't think you're coming in for a full discussion of every nuance of every show, because not everything's that interesting. Not everything has that many talking points. So here's what I would say. I will always throw that out to you guys, but you've seen what we're kind of throwing out there today. I want to talk about big talking point discussions that are going on in the world of professional wrestling. Blood back in WWE is something I want to talk about on today's show. I want to talk about Joe Tessitore and his debut on Monday Night Raw last night. We're going to get into that. I want to talk about the news of this, not the news, it is news. It's not a rumor. The new Swerve contract and the comments that were made and that were reported about. We're going to get into that today. And I want to talk about the presentation of Gunther, not only as a heel world champion, but as a cornerstone of the company. And how it is very refreshing to see someone booked in such a way where talent and creative are matching up beautifully and is giving us a wrestler who I could argue is the best one in the world right now. A lot of that is of his own doing, but a lot of that is also about how he's being presented in the biggest company in professional wrestling. So we're going to get into all that today. As always, you know what to do. You go subscribe at thewrestlingmatshow.com. If you haven't become a member yet, you could do so. You may have missed some of the things we did last week. We had an AMA last week. We had a private Zoom. We watched back Raw from 1997. From Germany, leading into WrestleMania 13. We watched Bash in Berlin. I keep calling it Bash at Berlin. I was corrected on Busted Open the other day. It's Bash in Berlin. I was like, Bash at the beach. It's Bash at Berlin, but it's Bash in Berlin. But we watched that here. If you remember, you know that. And if you're not a member and you want to be part of that, right there, it's thewrestlingmatshow.com. 3 tiers, so much to be giving you extra content. And I'm working on a couple extra things. I had a discussion with somebody who was absolutely crushing it in the wrestling content world. I had an idea. And if you're following us both on Twitter, you might know what I'm talking about. But I don't want to go there yet because we're still It's still in the incubation stage, but that can go fast. This is not the corporate world. If we want to do something, we think we can make it happen, that can happen very quickly. I also put my Mario question block here, and if you hit it, nothing happens. I'm just saying, this is where Bobby Heenan hits now. It's actually a Lego. You've seen a Lego tour if you've been on a member in the last week. A sneaker tour, you've gotten a Lego tour. That's just the bonus stuff. That's the extra stuff. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, share it, tell people that you're enjoying the show. You know what the chat is. I see the chat. And by the way, chat, if you want to get your question to the front of the line, you want to make sure I bring it up, or a topic I want to get to. It can be anything. Super chats are a great way to support the show, support me, support everybody we have here working on the wrestling mat. So think about using a super chat here today if you're watching the program. We will be moving this off of X soon just to make it exclusive to YouTube. That's all that is. That's not changing the show, but we will be moving it off of X probably in the next couple of days just because we want to direct everybody here to the YouTube channel because, honestly, that's how we make our money, and that's important here. That's what we're trying to do with the show. I'd love to do it as a hobby, but it's got to be more than that. So just a heads up on that, but nothing changing with the show. You'll see at 1 o'clock Eastern every single weekday. Hello, Nerdy Dude. Hello, Aaron. Hello, Cool Gamer. What's going on? Appreciate you. I'll hit this one quickly because I don't have an answer. Where is Odyssey Jones? I wonder what happened. I have no idea. I have asked within the company. I have asked people who I think would know. I don't know. I know he's off the roster page. I know he hasn't been on the show. I know he wasn't mentioned on the show. I know Xavier Woods kind of talked around it in a tweet because he was at some anime con. I will say this. In the current regime, storylines don't just disappear. I will say that happened. I know people who went through that in Black and Gold NXT at the end and into 2.0, where you would be booked and then they don't pick up your story for a couple weeks. I think Triple H had his faults with that. I think that stuff is gone now. So I say that to say I don't think it's connecting the dots probably makes a lot of sense here. He's off the roster page. They're not doing stuff, anything related to it. They're not talking about it. I don't know what happened. I don't know. And the other thing you have to think about here, just looking at all the angles. What does Endeavor look at in terms of suspensions, firings, wellness policy? I'm throwing all of those out there. How do they look at that? What is the public announcement on that? Is there a public announcement on that? You haven't seen people get wished the best in their future endeavors in a while when they get let go. It's just that has changed. So you got to think a little differently than what you used to hear. You would know about, hey, somebody got suspended or something. Like, I don't know what the policy is now. And they may have changed it and they go, we don't have to say a damn thing. So everything is, unfortunately, I guess you would say, on the table. However, I will say that, I think there's been times when somebody's been moved or taken off the roster and it's been a mistake or whatever. Those get fixed pretty quickly. If it's a mistake, it gets fixed pretty quickly. So take that for what you will. Once again, I have no inside information on that. I'll say this. I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. I hope everybody involved is fine. But I don't know that information. And that's just me. That's my mindset of what I just presented to you. All of those things could be on the table. We don't know. The silence is a bit deafening. I understand. But I also think it plays into something I noticed personally. That you tend to get noticed more or be in the news more. And some people might hear this and go, duh, Matt. But he's getting talked about more now than he ever has before. And I am aware that people were into him and I think into, his debut a few weeks back. But it is very telling when that kind of stuff is happening. I have noticed when I make headlines, It's because I've criticized a past employer. It's because I've had an overly strong opinion, intentional. Like I'm saying what I want to say. I'm not saying it to, make a headline. I've never done that, and I never will do that. I am aware of topics that will create headlines. I know that. That's part of this business. Like when I talked about the announcers the other day, and then I saw like that got picked up. Lack of bench. The responses were exactly what I expected. But it is very telling that there has been more attention to my words outside of the company versus inside the company. Maybe because they're real. Maybe because I wasn't part of the machine and playing a role, and I wasn't going to rock the boat when I worked there. I knew where my checks were coming from. I knew what my job was, and it was great. But I have noticed a lot of that more. And it's not, I'm using myself because I've been now in it for the last 6 months and the last few months since starting the show, that you latch on to what could be generally perceived as negative or heelish, which I'm never going to do on this show. I'm not going to talk that way, just talk that way. Anything I say on the show, I mean. It might piss people off. It might rub some people the wrong way, might rub some companies the wrong way. They'll get over it. I'm not changing their bottom line. And certainly nothing I'm saying is trying to change their bottom line or torpedo their business. No, I'm an analyst. I speak about it. But even something like Odyssey Jones, it's the gossip of it. It's not about a human being. It's the gossip of it. What happened? He came off the roster page. And then it becomes a talking point. And nobody has any information on it, which is why I explained it the way I explained it. I've had private conversations with people about it and what my opinions are. But I don't need to share those publicly because I don't know. And I'm not going to, and the problem is I can't share those because I know how they'll get taken. And that's about anything. But I think it is telling. And I'm not saying this is like I'm going to change the world and people are going to latch on to the positives, but I know that's not going to happen. It's more of just an observation I'm sharing because I have felt it personally. Because I see people like Ricky Starks every time he tries to say anything because of his absence from AEW, people jump on it, and sometimes he feels the need to jump in because it can be too much. And you have to tell people to shut up or they're telling the wrong story. That happened. The amount of times I saw a story get misreported when I was in WWE or reported with old information, you would be shocked. Now, old or new information, still going to get clicks, still going to make headlines. So it'll still get put out there. It is important to get the context. When I shared what I knew about the Hurt Business, I also made a point to say, no, this is not recent. This is going back when I had heard that maybe it would be Carmelo and Trick joining a new version of the Hurt Business. And sure, that got headlines of there were those plans are forever old. But at the same time, people still cared about it. People still ran with it. Hell, what was that story that somebody ran with like a third-hand source about Vince's declining health because Linda said it? And I went and clicked through, and it's like, this person heard from this person. Like, nothing credible about it. And believe me, not defending them. But it was more like, that's what you ran with? Yeah, because Vince's declining health would be a topic of discussion. And what exactly are you going to add to that? What is that Reddit thread really going to look like? Good. Oh, that makes sense because there's nothing fun about that conversation. It's a shitty conversation. Nerdy dude, I did not watch the pre-show. And I'm not going to speak about those people. I appreciate you pointing that out to me. I've said my piece on that whole situation. I'm done. If I wanted to exploit it for clicks, I'd keep talking about it, but I'm not going to. So anyway, I like to share my thoughts. My life is more than one opinion. And is not just about, wrestling 24/7. God knows it doesn't need to be. All right, so today's topics. Let's start with the one that you see right there. Will WWE bring blood with the move, back blood with the move to Netflix? I also ask you guys, should WWE bring back blood? Now, you go, all right, they have already. And that's part of the point. They don't hit you over the head with it. It is not all the time. But we have now seen a decent amount of blood in the last few months. CM Punk was bloodied last night with one hell of an attack, one great, physical, intense angle with Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. So perfectly executed. 2 matches already in the books. The second one better than the first. 7, 8 months of build. Hell, go back to Survivor Series when Drew may or may not have walked out because CM Punk returned. A long build. Not easy to build on what has already been done. What appeared to be a definitive victory on Saturday in Berlin for CM Punk. The GTS, the bracelet, and the final touch of the turnbuckle, and him going, I'm moving on. I want to think about the world title. I didn't expect him to be moving on. I didn't expect the story to go that way, but how would they do it? Would they take a break? Would they get Punk into a number 1 contender match or something like that? And then Drew messed with that. I thought that was in play. I discussed it on Busted Open on Sunday with Justin LeBar. Would it have to be consecutive pay-per-views, events to make the feud what it needs to be? The door was open for them to go elsewhere. However, you have Punk come out, say what he said last night, bracelet, blah, 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 aspirations, forget Drew, all that stuff. And you have Drew deliver the most vicious beatdown we have seen so far. Visually, we saw the kicks to the head, the claymore, everything looked vicious. It looked tight. It looked angry. It was a very believable stretcher job. And there was blood. And I bring up the point that we saw it visually because we've also seen Drew show up on SmackDown behind that garage door and drop Punk in a heap where we now don't know what happened, but see Punk is bleeding from the mouth. But that was more of the how did it happen. He literally carried his body in and dumped it. Here's Punk in Chicago. Here's your boy. He's bleeding. I did that to him. We don't know how he did it to him, but he did it to him. Last night, we saw him do it to him. Bronson Reed squashed Seth Rollins 6 times to make him cough up blood. Real blood? No. But blood. It's still the same visual. You go back to one of the biggest angles heading into WrestleMania was The Rock bloodying Cody Rhodes in the rain. Very intentional use of blood there. So, is it back already? Maybe it is, because here's why I bring that up. The next pay-per-view is called Bad Blood. A lot of us have maybe guessed that CM Punk and Drew McIntyre would happen inside Hell in a Cell, and it very well still could. But now that you have used blood, you have shown blood on Raw, a USA Network property that will remain a USA Network property, or whatever you want to call it, until the end of the year before they move to Netflix. However, CM Punk was bloody or bloodied and shown with real or fake blood, whatever you want to call it, on SmackDown, which was Fox. It seems under the current ownership and regime that we have to throw some old thoughts out the window. And so far, that's been for the positive. Almost all positive. Production, storylines, advertising, marketing, all that stuff. The company is getting bigger. It feels huge. If you're there now, if you're featured now, if you're getting a new contract now, congrats to you. Enjoy the ride. You are working for the number one wrestling company at the biggest they've ever been. That is a hell of a thing to be able to say if you work there right now. And I would say that about anybody who works there right now. And for those of you who don't think I think that way, I just said it. I know a lot of you know that already. If you're getting paid by WWE right now, and you're getting new money, new Endeavor, TKO money, you're in a hell of a spot. A hell of a spot. And I say that because now they have the advertisers. They have the big companies. They have the celebrities coming in. They're doing what they want to do very successfully. And they're doing what they want to do because no one is going to doubt them. They're delivering. The stock is doing great. Netflix is obviously thrilled to have them. USA Network's touting, you can see all of this on one channel in 2 weeks when they do WWE Week. Everybody who is working with WWE right now is happy. So they can do what they want within reason. And I think blood is absolutely back on the menu. And I think when you have a pay-per-view called Bad Blood, it ain't by mistake. So I throw this out to you. Could Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk be a first blood match with a month now to build this? I think it could. We've seen hard ways where people get bloodied. We saw Punk get bloodied on Saturday, and this is what really made me think of it. He got bloodied on Saturday, and they zoomed in. They showed it. They made a point to show it. That wouldn't have happened 2 years ago. So they're comfortable showing it. They're comfortable showing it. Peacock is okay seeing it, I guess. Universal, NBC is okay seeing it, I guess. They saw it again last night. We saw it a few weeks ago. Now, I asked that to you guys of, do you want to see it back? If I go a little further, do you care what it looks like? If it's back and it's used and you don't have to suspend your disbelief of, is that real or is it fake? Or is it a good storyline device if used correctly and safely? I think it is. I think it's been very hard to do some of these physical matches without blood. I actually agree with what Jon Moxley said when he was asked about how much he bleeds. It's like, so if you're getting in a real fight for more than 30 seconds, you're probably going to bleed. Like, it's going to happen. And he's right. It's the idea of a closed fist. If those are really working, we should see it. Which is like the most logical thing about fighting. If you get hit with a legal or illegal closed fist, your face should react accordingly. And it doesn't happen. So I get what he's saying. I understand that. You could also go, oh, it's done too much. Sure, not every fight will make you bleed. But if you're getting hit in the face and we're not seeing the ramifications of that, we're not seeing the results of that, then don't those punches kind of suck? People, it will look, you're not supposed to hurt each other. You're supposed to work with the other person. But those things happen. Kyrie saying last night, Can't believe I haven't even talked about that yet because it was everywhere this morning. How badass she looked. She had the stitches over her eye. I once had stitches in the exact same place because I got an elbow in pool basketball. Like the weekend I graduated from high school, I took an elbow right here. Same, I looked exactly this. I saw her stitches. Like, oh, I had those. Mine were a little higher. Mine were more into the eyebrow. And she was good, right? It was a mistake. It happens. She looked like a badass. She might put an eye patch on next week, and the Pirate Princess is all the way back. But it looked like a wound of war. It looked like a wound of battle. That looked cool because she's a baby face, and she took it, and she got right in there. She was jaw-jacking with Jade and Bianca. It was great. Looked cool. But if you're going to step into a feud like this, where there was trolling, there were personal shots, Punk screwed over Drew 3 times for the world title, where Drew went last night was unhinged, more personal, trying to end a career. And I know those words have been said. So they got to go somewhere with that. Now, somewhere with that could be First Blood. And you could say Drew already drew First Blood. You could also say, and I just saw a comment there from Kay Haynes, what's the point of having a cage match of any kind or fight with no rules without blood? Because it should come out of that. So if they were to get back into or get into Hell in a Cell, the handicap of Hell in a Cell has been 2 things. Number 1, naming a pay-per-view that and then having to basically force feuds into cell matches that didn't always warrant it. That was stupid. That was dumb. You totally watered down the concept. I'll say 3 problems. Number 2, you had things like people going off the cell multiple times, and Mick Foley was the first one to do it, and we've seen it happen all the way up with Shane or halfway or whatever. That's been a problem to up your game. And the third thing is the inability to bleed. The inability to get the true physicality and get a match over of that level. Last week, I told the entire story of Brett and Owen and how it culminated, at least in the ring, with the 1994 SummerSlam Blue Bar Steel Cage match and the fact that they couldn't do violence of that nature. So they had to make it about who could escape, and they built a hell of a story in that match around who could escape, and it was dramatic. It's not a typical cage match. It's very thrilling, it's very exciting, but it's not a typical cage match. Cage matches are supposed to finish it. Cage matches are made for things like Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. Cage matches are made for Swerve and Hangman this weekend. I think blood has its place. And I also bring that up, as other people are saying, because you have Rhea and Liv. You have Priest and Finn. Those have escalated. What's to say we can't do First Blood, Drew, Punk? And have Hell in a Cell, Rhea and Liv? You could do both. The next thing, because we've seen the blood for the men intentionally, is going to be, are they going to go there with the women? Mariah May turning on Tony with the belt shot and the heel shot absolutely needed that blood. Now, they had done it before with Thunder Rosa and Britt. Others have bled before. I think Willow has bled. I think Chris has bled. There has been a lot of it in AEW, and I understand that. And I also know it's wrestling, so we can have that whole argument, just like Moxley said, of, well, if you're going to do blood, it makes sense because fights should result in blood. Yes, but also there's this, there's creative license in wrestling. Doesn't always have to create that. But when it adds to the feud, it makes sense. Not everything should have it intentionally. Not everything should have it intentionally. If it happens, it happens. But if done correctly, and it seems like you guys are kind of on board, it can be done, it can be used correctly, and WWE can bring it back. Excuse me. Aaron says it's made wrestling feel more real. And I understand that. When used in the right spot. I think it does come across real. I think if you see blood. See, here's what I would say. You watch a Chris Jericho, Nick Gage match, right? Thank you, nerdy dude. And thank you for posting that before. I was not mad at that. I appreciate you letting me know what happened on that insightful kickoff show yesterday. Sunday. When Nick Gage faced Chris Jericho, they were going for blood. Like that was the point. You're going to bleed in this match. Like that was it was it was part of that story of what Jericho had to do and all that stuff. But like he had blood was going to be part of that match. It was a given. Whereas Drew McIntyre wants to make CM Punk bleed. Punk probably wants to get blood back. That's personal. That's not the match type. The match type will work into that. If you're going to do a hardcore death match, whatever, blood is, it's a given, even if the story's not personal. It's just the type of match it is. But if the story gives you the match and not the other way around, then it has more meaning. And I think it has meaning for CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And I do think this would be it. 3 is the number. Not to say they shouldn't forget about their rivalry, because I think they have gotten to a point of every time they see each other, it's, the Chicken and Peter Griffin. It's Marty and Shawn in the Rumble. It's Sammy and Kevin when they're feuding or when they're enemies. I want them to go fight each other all the time. I want that feud to last forever. It doesn't always have to be the focus of what either man is doing at the time, but they have something. And they have a hatred that should never be forgiven. I don't want them to be friends because it's gotten personal. So, yeah, I do think a big stip like a Hell in a Cell or a First Blood match or a Hell in a Cell that will end up having blood is the right way to go and should be the way you go and should end the feud. But it should never end their animosity because those two guys, as we've learned since January, in wrestling, were meant to not like each other and were meant to be opponents and were meant to never be friends. I like that could come back into the play down the road. Whoever wins this feud, let's say it's Punk. What if Drew happens to get something on him at the Rumble? B-May, let's talk about that for a second. Let's put that up. B-May is a member. We get to see his comments here. I'm torn on this because there is not a better live experience than a GCW show, but I don't necessarily want to see it all the time on Raw or SmackDown. And I agree with that completely. You're going to GCW, and by the way, as B-May will tell you, and I know people that work there and have friends there, it's not all about the blood. There is an ECW aspect of it, not in the hardcore nature, but that it is introducing people to wrestlers you may not know and wrestling styles you may not know and different cultures and different journeys in the wrestling business. ECW brought us Psychosis and Rey Mysterio. We got to see Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and that wrestling style. We saw hardcore matches and flaming tables and blood and chairs and all that. We did see all that stuff too. My earliest personal memories of ECW are Super Crazy Tajiri and Little Guido having three-way dances on TNN. Yes, I knew of RVD and all that stuff before that, but that's one of the first things I equate with ECW. That's got nothing to do with the hardcore wrestling. That, to me, is a big part of what GCW is. Yes, it is the premier big home for deathmatch wrestling. Absolutely it is. Matt Cardona came on this very show, said his whole career changed because of being in that match with Nick Gage. But what is he doing now? Now he is being a perfect heel in that company as he's the anti-GCW guy, and they're running stories with it. And there are screw jobs, and some of the matches get more violent than others, but there's also some great wrestling on there. So, geez, that could be part of the GCW show, but it's not the whole thing, and they have evolved over time, and I think that's why they've gotten better. And, B. May just said, GCW is the perfect mix of everything to me. Storytelling isn't their strong suit, but even now with Cardona stuff, it's a good storytelling. He never left their promotion when he got hurt. And he sold tickets for them. And they've had good cliffhangers, and they've had fun heel runs, and JBL showing up, or the former Jinder Mahal, all that stuff. But they mix it up. And you're going there for that. You may not go to Raw and SmackDown looking for that. You might want to say, hey, I want to watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, because there isn't that kind of stuff. And I think there's an understanding to that. And the advertisers definitely still come into play. You don't want to go all in on the blood. I don't think that's what the product is. I don't think every feud should allow that or should lead to that. I think it matters more when you get something that is hitting as strongly as Punk and Drew. And this is a way to enhance it. It's not a crutch. Blood would enhance the feud because that's where it's gone. And it's enhanced the feud a couple times. And it enhanced what was going on between Cody and Rock. The fact that we can pick these instances out over a 5-month span and point to them specifically of this helped, this, that is what I'm talking about. That they stand out more. So I think there is something to it. And I think they can do it correctly. And then I don't think we would see it for a while, nor should we. But I do think it can be a storyline aspect that can return. If the feud, it's very simple. It's like anything. If a feud calls for it and it's gotten to that point, personal thing. Someone's beat a champion multiple times. Okay, it's time for a title match. Like a reason. I always just want a reason. I can't tell you how many people I discussed WWE storylines with under Vince when I was there. Of just fill in the gaps a little bit. Just fill in the gaps. That's it. And that started to happen under Hunter. It doesn't happen all the time. You could fill in the gaps. Doesn't mean it's good stories. That happens too. But fill in the gaps. Give me a reason to pay attention. Pay off me paying attention. That's simple. In this case, I'm talking about, I think blood would add to that story. I'm glad we had that. I'm glad to see the responses. Not that I need everybody to agree with me, but it seems like everybody's like, hey, if I think everybody seems to agree. If it's done correctly, yes, it should be back in the mix. Not all the time, Canes, see blood, but when a feud or match type calls for it, I want blood because it's supposed to be a battle for a win and more. That's it. If it's part of it, it makes sense. It should be in there. Okay. I want to talk about Joe Tessitore from last night. I think I've said this. I was an exception. And once again, here is another great example of the new regime. Joe Tessitore is 100% a real wrestling fan and has been. I know he commented after the show last night. I'm the guy who skipped 8th grade, whatever, to go see Big John Studd. I cheered against Paul Orndorff. You can't fake that. Believe me. You can't fake that. And now I'm going to sound arrogant. If you're sitting next to people who know what they're talking about and are fans and have been fans, you're going to come across real quickly when you don't know what you're talking about. It's going to be very obvious. And it's going to be very obvious if you're faking it. I have worked with people in sports, in wrestling like that. And listen, you can get away with that. You can absolutely get away with that if you don't try to show off knowledge you don't have. Or you don't try to show off a fandom you don't have. If you play it neutral, if you play to the people around you who know more, you're going to do fine. I always gave Kayla credit for that. I don't know as much as you. I want to. I want to learn. But I'm not going to go down that road if I don't have an opinion that's going to have some weight behind it. And Kayla was very good at that. Hey, my role is to be the host of the show. I direct traffic. I have opinions on things. Matt has different opinions on things. Matt's the wrestling analyst. Matt's going to go deeper. I'm not going to try to match him. And I'm not going to match some of the things that she does. I don't have that bubbly personality. I don't, that my role was different. Jackie was also great about that kind of stuff. She got better. She learned. She watched the product, as did Kayla, and you would go, oh, wait. Oh, that's a good point. We could have a back and forth. Kayla could offer a different opinion or a different viewpoint. And I would ask her about that from her viewpoint. Or, that kind of stuff worked. But when you are someone who goes out there and tries to pretend, and yes, if you work in WWE and you're on camera, there's an element of pretending because it's still a show. You might want to present it in more of a sports way with that level of competition, but everybody's on the same team. Everybody's on the same page. There is a script. Everybody's following the script. But you can definitely tell when someone's faking it or not paying attention. It's so easy to pay attention to the job you're doing, especially when it's pro wrestling. Hey, can you just pay attention to the product? You know how many times I got told by Michael Cole in a group, hey, and this is coming from him, so he's older, and I get what he's saying. If you can't watch everything, but you should, but for him, hey, we have a great website, which is hilarious that he's like, go to WWE.com. But it's there. It's a resource. Our social media is a resource. Peacock, the WWE network that you have access to, these are resources. Use them. Anytime somebody new got hired that I would come in contact with, I would try to reach out and go, hey, use me as a resource. If you have questions, please ask me. I'm happy to have you on the team. What can I do to help? Loved doing that. And you would see people go, hey, that's cool. I had certain wrestlers that were going into a stip match or doing so. Any ideas for matches I could watch? Yes, absolutely. We're on the same team. Let's work together. That's how it should be. Doesn't always work out that way. Joe Tessitore last night came across as so comfortable in the role that I would have thought he worked there for 10 years. His voice is a huge help. A huge help. And sometimes people are just blessed with that. He is blessed with that. He has a very natural, booming sports, boxing, holy moly, which was a show about like mini golf and Wipeout or whatever. It's the right voice for it. You have to have that. Not everybody can sound the same. There is an element I can hear of Michael Cole, his cadence in what Joe was doing. And I'm not surprised by that at all. And it's not a bad thing. And he'll find probably some of his own his own style. But there was a comfort level there that has been sorely needed. to follow up on there have a short bench conversation. If Joe Tessitore continues on the path that he started last night, that bench just got a hell of a lot stronger, and it's not even the bench. I'm not saying it as a bench. I'm saying the roster. How's that? It's not about a bench. That roster got a hell of a lot stronger last night because they put a guy on one of their flagship shows that they shouldn't have to worry about. They put a guy that they don't have to go, well, at least we still have Cole. Think about what Cole was doing when he was doing double duty. That was a lack of trust in anyone else. That is when I called out the lack of roster. That's right there for you. I don't think that problem exists now. I think Corey goes back. And by the way, not enough was made. For whatever reason, not enough was made of the transition that Corey made from color commentator to play-by-play. A transition that I have talked about. I was told could have happened years ago. That was an ongoing discussion. That's where some of my short bench comments came from. That your best color guy, your best color commentator on the shows in your company has to move over. That's a short roster. That's a short bench to me. Because you couldn't find anybody else you trusted to be in that spot. But that has nothing to do with the fact that Corey nailed it. That he had to, and it just comes with the territory. He's going from a position where your opinion is very important to a position when your opinion is nowhere near as important because you have somebody next to you and that's their job. You don't want to have bickering for the sake of bickering. I think everybody has heard that on commentary. I think everybody at a time when that is pushed by Vince or KD of no. Then it becomes a Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby the Brain impression. And no one could match that chemistry. No one could match their natural chemistry. No one could match the natural comedic timing of Bobby Heenan, and nobody could match Gorilla Monsoon being able to keep him in line. But there were a lot of people trying to do that impression over the years because they were probably forced to start that bickering. But when those guys get to call the show, sure, Wade can lean into the heels more. Sure, Taz might lean into the heels more, or Nigel does it even more so over the top. Or Wade does. Or Corey did, and he might go back to doing. It's good to have the different perspectives. It's absolutely good to have that. But when you put Corey on play-by-play, you're taking some of his bite away. So now, because the roster got bolstered in a big way, it seems like last night, now you have a cornerstone play-by-play guy on both of your main shows. And if somebody needs a week off, sure, then you plug the other one in. But it's not let's hope this works out. Yeah, I know they're going to switch him back and all that. Whenever Cole will be moved back to Raw, all that stuff. I get that. But I think last night they found themselves someone who loves wrestling, who is a fan, and he's a hell of a broadcaster on top of that. And that is the magical combination. And they didn't lean into that for a very long time. As I said, I got hired by Digital. I was an exception. They wanted blank slates of wrestling. They wanted to teach you wrestling, and you come in with your broadcasting background. Why not both? And by the way, another big part of it is you can attract someone like a Joe Tessitore because you can afford him. Because I'm sure that wasn't cheap, and nor should it be. And you know what? Nor should that be budgeted as a cheap position. They have the money. They're starting 2 brand new TV contracts with Netflix with Raw and with SmackDown going to USA, and 3 with CW with NXT. But I'm saying the main 2 big shows. You should invest in those shows across the board, whatever that's going to be. That is not a throwaway position. Not that it was treated that way, but it should be paid and treated as accordingly. It's a big spot on that show. It is the voice that everybody hears for the entire 3 hours. The consistent voice that they will hear every Monday or Friday. Joe Tessitore has given WWE a major asset that they have needed for quite some time. And I absolutely tip my cap to whoever hired him, whoever thought that was the right call. And the work that he put in was evident last night. That is a confident broadcaster who was prepared, who didn't sound like he was trying to catch up with the show. He'll improve things. He's a broadcaster. It's his first show. But all of the fundamentals are there. The sound is there. The cadence is there. He will improve things. He will get coaching. I don't think he'll get as much coaching as he would have a couple years ago, but he probably wouldn't have been hired a couple years ago. I had been saying for months, who's going to be the next broadcasting talent that they hire? Who's going to be the first one, really? Everybody else has had some work with the previous regime. This was a very telling step and a very good step. And I am looking forward to hearing him and Wade. And by the way, Wade is friggin' great. Hearing him open Raw last night, a part of me went, man, I wish Wade had another role on the show. I wish Wade could be cutting promos in the main event. I didn't know what it was. And I know he's very valuable because I just talked about that. He's very valuable in the role he's playing now as the color commentator on Monday Night Raw and one of the top 2 color commentators in the company. But man, I was like, God, I wish Wade was doing more in that ring every week. And that's maybe just me being a fan of that guy. But God, does he have a presence. Aaron, I was really impressed with Joe. Personally, I'd rather Joe over Pat. Pat is over. See, here's the thing, Aaron. Those are 2 different spots. Those are 2 different spots. Joe would work with Pat. Just like Cole would work with Pat. You wouldn't put Wade with Pat. They're playing the same role. Joe with Pat might happen at some point down the road. Could happen. All right. Spend a lot of time on those things. I'd like to talk about Swerve Strickland's new contract, which he signed right there on the day of All In. The world champion signs a new contract. And I'm going to pull up the quote, because I have it here, of a response. I'm going to find this. Here we go. Because there was a response that was absolutely just, and it's the main one, the baffling response of, with Swerve signing a new contract with a company that has proven now to be financially competitive to WWE. The money is there. It's been fantastic for the business in that way. And that there's another place to go that can pay you a very, very strong salary. That is an excellent thing. Fantastic. Now, here's what I was bothered by. And this was reported in the Observer. That the offers that were put out there for Swerve getting what he got, which is apparently, according to Meltzer, a deal that locks him up through September 2029. And he had even mentioned that WWE tried to get him. And it's believed that it's a very big deal. These are all positive things. These are all taking nothing away from anybody else. He is the world champion of was the world champion of the number 2 company in pro wrestling, which is raking in massive amounts of money. Yes, AEW is making money. WWE is making a hell of a lot more, but both companies are backed by a lot of money and are making a lot of money. And the people who perform at the highest levels in those companies should be making, you guessed it, a lot of money. Now, here is the line that is ridiculous. The deal and the offer to Daniel Garcia were told to us by someone on the WWE side for Garcia and more than one on Strickland as being bad for the sport because they are so far over what WWE would perceive the market value for both to be. And with the idea he's spending more than he needs to and raising salaries. It's bad for the sport because now it's a financial competitor. And that means you have to pay people fair value of the market. It's like when a quarterback who may not be the best quarterback in the league resets the market. That's how this works. That's how it works. If someone is offering anyone in a sport or entertainment a certain amount of money, that means that is their value, and you have to pay it. And we're not talking about, especially in the case of Swerve, someone random. I know, and I'm not going to say their names, that there were mid-card acts in WWE, and I say mid and I'm being nice. It's probably low-card acts that barely appeared on television or did not have any kind of important role that they were drawing for the company, that were given lots of money to stay with WWE just so they didn't go to AEW. And that is where the financial competition began. Now, did that happen to a point where WWE probably overreacted? Yes. You could hold talent away from there, but at some point they realized, no, we can let them go, and how the company is presented and how it is booked will also be a massive factor on how they draw attendance and ratings. You can bring talents in. You could pay them a lot of money. They still have to be presented well, and that goes for anywhere. You can pay a quarterback a bunch of money. If he doesn't have an offensive line to protect him, you've wasted that money. That is just how it goes. So if WWE now has to pay a little bit more to keep people, and by the way, they are. I have heard from multiple people that someone who has been a fairly regular main eventer in WWE just got a massive 5-year deal. Massive. Multi-year deal, multi-million-dollar deal. This is not someone that is all over the place doing media for the company. This is not someone who is a major mover for the company in terms of merch or, doing stuff for Fanatics. They do very well. They're a very reliable main eventer. And the number I heard, I was shocked. I was thrilled for that person, but I was shocked. But I also went, you know what? They have it. So pay it, because you can afford it. That's good. If you are a main event caliber wrestler and you are being considered that way and you are being booked that way and you are seen that way, not everybody's role is QB1 like Cody Rhodes or Roman Reigns. Not everybody's like that. They should be paid more. They're the biggest. They're drawing. But if you're important to that company, yeah, a 5-year, $30 million deal does make sense if you're a main eventer and a consistent main eventer and an asset to the company. Yes, if someone just signed a 5-year deal worth $30 million, that number is not crazy because they have it. So no one should be questioning the market for main eventers and WWE not being able to deal with that. And it goes the other way, too. That might price AEW out of things. Okay. That's how it works. It's not salary caps, but what are you willing to spend? This person has made themselves valuable. This person has made themselves into an asset that multiple companies would want to have. Pay him. Good for Swerve. If that story I heard is true, I'm very happy for that person that got that big contract from WWE, and I hope more of them are there to come. In the big picture, for the numbers that WWE brings in from ratings and attendance, there is no off season. If you get rid out of a story, maybe you're off for a couple weeks. It's a lot of time on the road. It's a lot of work. No, I'm not saying they're professional athletes in that way, but they're still very important to the entertainment company. They're still very important to the bottom line of that company and the creative of that company. As Rob is posting some of the last quarter numbers from WWE. $456.8 million in revenue. More than half came from the media rights. The money is there. A monopoly would be a bad thing for your favorite pro wrestlers. You know what I don't want to have to see anymore? GoFundMe for wrestlers when they're older. And I know it happens. Wouldn't you like to not have to see those anymore because they don't have to rely, they don't have to tell the story of, hey, you know, they gave you so much as a fan. It'd be nice to pay them back. And I get that. And I feel for those people that are going through those situations. But I really hope that the wrestlers of this generation, A, are smart with their money, and B, make enough money for what they put their bodies through so we're not seeing GoFundMes when something happens to them later in life. And that money is there to be had and should be paid. So good for Swerve and good for anybody that is finding themselves getting offers from multiple companies to get paid. Go get paid. You should. And if there's any comments about that from decision makers in either company, it's just because you've made their job tougher. It's just because maybe their money doesn't get to be as high. But the money is there for the people who we see every week. Good. I hope more of that continues to happen. I don't have a lot of time left. I want to do this quickly. What we saw from the WWE on Saturday in the main event was a very telling and positive sign, multiple positive signs for a creative part of the company, and that is how Gunther walked in to an international premium live event. Sold out house pretty much, as they announced the highest revenue gate they've ever done for an arena show. He walked into that show on his first title defense as the world champion, and he submitted one of the greatest wrestlers in WWE history, Randy Orton, clean in the middle of the ring. And nothing looked out of place. What they have been able to now accomplish is that championship right there has been elevated to a level they needed it to be at. That championship right there main evented that pay-per-view over Cody Rhodes in the WWE Championship, and it 100% made sense to do so. That is huge. Because I think back of the big gold world heavyweight title and the WWE Championship, and there were times when one felt bigger than the other. You don't want that. You want them to be even, but there were times one felt bigger than the other. And then the WWE and the Universal. But it felt like there had been a gap, and a big gap between the WWE Championship and the World Heavyweight Championship ever since it was introduced. And the way they did it was, I was there. I was the one who was like, hey, here's the title. Here it is. Here's all the great parts about it. But it's not Roman's. Because we couldn't get that away from him, and we can't book him for enough dates, which they made kind of story. We couldn't do that. So let's create this title, and this champion's going to be here. And very convoluted. And very not on the level. So what we do? Okay, let's put Seth's the guy. He wins this tournament. He beats AJ Styles. Now he's gonna wrestle everywhere. He's gonna be on NXT. He's gonna battle through his injury. Everything you'd want to do, but the bottom line was Seth couldn't beat Roman. Not that he got a lot of chances, but nobody could beat Roman. So that title still comes across as secondary. And he kept it for a while, and he battled and he battled and he battled. And Drew, and then Priest. And then Priest, as I said, was a background player to what was going on in his own faction, what was going on with Drew and Punk, and that didn't help the title. He's come out better on the other end. Priest is way more over and way more interesting and way more popular and a way more important part of the show now that he doesn't have the title. But now you've put it on Gunther. And you've had him from the jump, basically, booked perfectly. NXT UK. He's the guy. He's the ultimate. Nobody can beat him. That's established. He doesn't cheat. He's a heel because he looks down on you. He'll shake your hand after you beat his words, everything. But people liked him. And he goes through NXT and wasn't there super long. They did the name change, and they had Braun beat him and all that stuff. But when he's come up, since he's come up, even though Vince was around for a little of it, or back, or whatever, Gunther has been unstoppable. And he backs it up. And his booking is backing it up. And he has the great run that he did with the Intercontinental Championship. And I think he lifted that title up. But he lifted that up because the booking lifted it up. He just followed through. In a very, very strong way. Everything looks right about him. He's improved his game. So what happens? You take all that. You take the Chad Gable story. And I was like, this will be it, right? Chad's a great guy. He'll come back around. And they had him battle them and come back around. And then Sammy gets it. And Sammy being an underdog, he beats him. Which is why we got what we got last night, obviously. He beat him. He put the shoulders to the mat of someone who could not be defeated. Which is why it made even more of a big deal to have Braun Breaker defeat that guy in Sami Zayn. And by the way, there's a story you could tell down the road. I beat you in NXT, and I took the title from the guy who took it from you. That sounds like a recipe for me beating you for the world title or whatever it is down the road. They have that story. There is a Braun Gunther story to tell with actual things that have happened. That's a great use of history. They have that in the back pocket. There will be a Braun babyface run where that can be brought up. You've never beaten me, but I've beaten the guys that have beaten you. So you don't have that on me. You don't have that psychological advantage on me. We're nowhere near that. But here we go. The strength of booking Gunther has helped the Intercontinental Championship, which in turn helped Sami Zayn, which in turn helped Braun Breaker. And now, what happens? Gunther loses the IC title. He's not down for very long. He wins the King of the Ring. It gets him a title shot. So now the stakes of the King of the Ring matter more. The man who won it is as credible as possible, and you've now added something else to his resume. You didn't treat him like a goofy king. You just said he won a tournament. My trophy is this crown. What I really care about is winning the World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam, and he did that. I didn't love that there was interference, but it was part of that story, and honestly, you really totally and completely believe that Gunther could beat and did beat Damian Priest, with or without help. And so what do? You line him up against Randy Orton, and he looks every bit the part. And he matches him in promos. And it calls back to what they did at King of the Ring. And now you go, listen, here is the one possible bit of blemish on his record. He wants to erase that. He takes on the challenge of Randy Orton. Gunther is a heel in his words, not in his wrestling. Gunther will build you up because you're his opponent, but he finds a way to tear you down. He'll question your career. He'll question your methods. He'll question your philosophy because he didn't do it that right way. He did it what he thinks is the right way. But he finds a way to cut down his opponents, but not to the point that they can't get back up. They can fire back on him. And when it comes down to it, it gets settled in the ring. And that's what happened. He walked in there with respect. He walked in there with a lot of fans. So did Randy Orton. But when he choked Randy out in the middle of the ring, it looked every bit the believable it should be for a guy who looks like Gunther, who has wrestled like Gunther, who has been presented like him, to beat Randy Orton in the middle. And it was a huge victory in that way. And the handshake after that, none of that hurt anybody. Randy's going to be fine. Randy could be heated right back up wherever you need him to be, and he probably is still there this Friday. They won't do it because it's on Fox, and they can't wait to get the hell off of Fox, but that's a different story. Everybody did a good job in their role, from Gunther to Randy to Sammy to all of that. A lot of people were like, well, look at all the people they fed to Roman. Look at all the baby faces they threw away. There is some legitimacy to that. But the right guy beat Cody. The right guy beat Roman. It was Cody. They didn't mess that up. Everybody who's run up against Gunther has been part of building him up to what this is. And now Randy Orton's the latest. And guess what? It's going to lead to more feuds that will make money, that will be on the top of cards. The World Heavyweight Championship and Gunther have helped each other out. The World Heavyweight Championship was sought after by Randy Orton because he wants to get to 16, and that's part of a way to get to 16. That made that title matter more. And when he didn't get the job done, the guy who beat him, that made Gunther matter more. That made the World Heavyweight title matter more. And I think it's much closer now in terms of value to the company and maybe fan perception than it was 2 months ago. And the Gunther presentation is a very big part of that. And I think he might be a perfectly booked professional wrestler. And that's a hell of a thing to have, especially for a company that needs heels. They have one. They have a main event caliber heel. And I say all that to say, John Cena versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania feels like the right call. And it's a legit toss-up of who would win that match. And we're a long way from that. I talk about building up heels for your baby faces. Cody doesn't have enough. Bronson Reed seems to be on that path. Unfortunately, COVID. Hopefully he's feeling better. But Gunther is the kind of person you want to get to a level so that when you put him up against John Cena at WrestleMania or wherever they might do it next year, maybe they won't do it at all, it's not a foregone conclusion. I think it says a lot that myself and others were like, Randy's not beating Gunther. Randy, think of that. Think of me saying that to you 2 or 3 years ago. Hey, there's going to be a pay-per-view. They're going to do it in Berlin, and it's going to be a foregone conclusion, logically, that Gunther is going to beat Randy Orton. Walter is going to, imagine me saying that 5 years ago. Walter's going to have a very big, he'll be the favorite on all the odds books against Randy Orton for a world title in WWE at a main event pay-per-view. And that was the case this past weekend. That's exactly what it was. And they executed a match that I expected to go the way it went, even better than I would have expected. That is great booking. That is a great champion. And that is how you make a main event heel. And that will do it for today's show. Please subscribe at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Become a member down below. And make sure, if you haven't done so yet, you are subscribed on the Believe Network. Make sure you search Wrestling Matt on any of your podcast platforms that you listen to, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Very helpful that you subscribe there. For those of you that are listening on Believe, listening on podcasts, thank you very much. But come on over to thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Subscribe. You get so much more. You get to see what we're doing here. You get to see me. You get to see older videos. You get to see our segments, our interviews. You get to get a lot more if you become a member. So we'd love to have you there. And we would love to have you on our podcast. So make sure you're subscribed there. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. 5 stars are always appreciated. Subscribe to thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Become a member. Share, comment. I'm always there answering those for you guys. And I'll be back tomorrow to talk about pro wrestling even more right here at 1 p.m. Eastern on the Wrestling Mat.